Oh, good morning, committee, and it's Thursday morning, the 13th, and this is the Agricultural Commission and Agricultural Committee. We're going to be working on H472 miscellaneous ag subjects. And we have Michael Grady with us to run through that bill. I think you all have copies of that. Mm-hmm. And so good morning, Michael. And we'll get started with your presentation.
Sure. So this is Michael Grady of Office of Legislative Counsel. Hopefully you all have the bill as introduced.
We have draft 2.6.
What bills?
Which?
Well, I think this is the miscellaneous one.
H472,
Yeah, no, it does. It has a draft request number, but it doesn't have a bill number.
that's not it. Wait, is it?
You should have.
Is the miscellaneous item?
There's 3.7.
You have what was passed.
That was 3.4.
Yeah, you
I
probably.
don't know what.
Is that
Did I not get that to you?
Maybe the ASCAS isn't on the web yet.
this was printed?
Oh, sorry.
You have the bills in H472 as introduced.
I didn't see it. Did I go it?
I'm gonna go make copies of the ASCAS version for you.
Thank you. Isn't this?
Where that draft came from it was done the 15th.
Yeah, March 15th.
Same thing, draft request 230761
That's what it is.
is 472. I think that is as it was passed out of the House.
Oh,
Michael,
oh, it's the
yeah, you
same.
can look at that now while you're waiting for Michael, because I think that's exactly what he's going to be bringing us.
So we had you down, Irene, but I think you.
My report notes? I'm reporting on 205?
205.
Sure.
And I was thinking of Brian, but Brian's plate's pretty full with his.
It's right now, yeah.
Stuff, and so I'll leave that with Brian, you or Richie do that.
Whichever, because we got the other one too.
Yeah.
We got
The
3 bills.
With the Derek note?
The
The cannabis.
well, the cannabis one, what we'll do is it's the way it's gonna work is we'll submit that to
Ropes.
no, to the next committee down. And they'll make the changes in there.
Okay.
And 270, that's an H bill. And they aren't gonna work, they've gotta work on their housing, that stuff.
Suck it in.
And that's to get down to
Barely get by you. I
budget.
don't know whether that's you and my big belly.
Yeah, he got somebody giving something away for free.
Well, you'll need that today.
I gotta scrape the crap off from here.
Hey, Richie, do you want to report a bill?
What?
Do you want to report a bill?
But Bill,
The miscellaneous ag bill from the house.
I think the vice chair volunteered.
Well, I
Very
say
good one.
would, but if you want to do it, I wouldn't want to ask you without asking.
All right.
I don't really, I've reported enough bills in my life. I don't need to.
Have you done a bill on the floor yet for,
No, I just got assigned 205, but I,
that's your, you haven't done anything in that.
I'll help you in appropriations as much as I can. That's gonna be a heavy enough lift.
The way the money situation is,
It's gonna be enough of a
it's
lift.
unreal.
and we have a dairy bill too that we're gonna do, or we're gonna do the crisis dairy bill as a committee. It's not gonna be a bill, it's gonna just happen through the budget. Okay. Just checking.
I spoke with Jane about it. And I said, you want us to bill and send down?
Yeah, so you just-
No, you've got to see at the table, you better. We'll just do it.
Nice.
So we got 2 or 3 things.
But the rules around it were in our bill. We had to sort of the rules
It
around
should
it.
be as, that should be.
Okay.
Does that also get
No.
inserted into the big bill? I don't have that.
Hopefully.
Great,
And
thanks a lot.
on that particular bill, I think it's very important for us to keep pushing feds to see where that 100 million
Oh, yeah.
is
Yeah, the end of
gonna
March
get
is coming
handed out. Because if that gets handed out, the way money is down there, it's crazy. The ask, and nobody's happy with what they're getting, they all want more. And when you say more, it isn't a few thousand, it isn't even a few 100,000, it's usually in millions. So they, when you start handing out in millions, it disappears really quick.
So we're just about 400 million over in testimony and over what the governor's budget. And that doesn't include the big bills that we've seen. That doesn't include childcare that we've passed or any of the
Yeah.
requests that we've got from other committees, which I would think gotta be in the range of at least 150 to 200 with that.
No,
So I
I
would say we're probably dealing with 600 million more than what the governor in to accommodate.
Yeah, we're actually, we need the MC money.
Yeah.
We need the organic guys money. We need the fencing money.
Oh, did he not get that grant? Do we know about the grant? Did he get,
They
did
got
Dan get the grant?
Little grant. Yeah,
Did he get the grant?
yeah, for
Good.
around 50,000. So
Well, that's
we only
50, we don't have to
need-
give him. That's good.
Yeah, so we don't need 250, but to do the project, was it about 150?
Yeah, I would think that was.
So that's, so our ass down in that room are tiny compared to,
Well, there is more freedom.
Salvation Farms and Conservation.
yeah. In the house, they forgot to put the organic guys' money in, so.
After all that.
So, and the problem that creates for us is there's nowhere to negotiate from. So if we go in and the box gets tight and the chair says to us, you have to squeeze something. You know, say we go in and we ask for the 6.9 and we get 3, there's no place to negotiate from the
To
down.
get it up higher or lower.
You know, they were, I don't know what they were thinking when they didn't even put it on the table,
Yeah. But,
because they have no position.
Well, thanks for the update.
we got another. That,
We count on you to work your magic.
so anyways,
I'll be
let's,
watching.
yeah, you better be right behind me and not be afraid to speak up. because-
Bipartisan support.
Wait, sometimes Richie's quiet,
Well, that,
sometimes Richie's quiet in that committee.
well, there's a time and place for everything. Yeah, so anyways, let's get back to our task today. And so,
Yep, you showed 472 is passed by the House.
yeah, and so you wanna get.
Sure. So first, this is the House miscellaneous ag subjects bill. The first couple of sections deal with the ag fairs and field days. As I think most of you know, for years, they've had a stipend program to provide all of the fairs with some funding, and then there's a competitive grant program as well. Well, that stipend program was administered under an agency rule that was authorized in Title 30 by, it was basically one of the gambling sections. And that section of law was repealed by the boards and commissions bill that comes through every year. And so the stipend rule doesn't have any statutory authority anymore. And so what is being proposed in these first couple of sections is to establish a statute in Title VI, so no longer in Title 30, programming basically the framework for how money will be awarded to the fairs and field days. Fairly consistent with what the stipend we have been, but not exactly the same.
Well, didn't the stipend money come out of the capital bill? Is this still allowing?
So there's the capital money, and then there's the other kind of competitive grant money. And so this is, you have to kind of, the stuff that's coming out of the capital bill for facilities will continue to be there. And this is more the competitive grant program.
Okay, this is not the stipend.
Well, the rule dealt with both. So, and you should have the agency in to come and talk about how this changes whatever is going to be awarded to theirs.
Yeah, because it has worked pretty well, even without the law, I guess, being on the books. They would use the stipend program to do the capital expenditures. And then the grants program would come out of ag,
Right.
which we would put in their regular ag budget.
But they don't have a rule anymore for how that money is awarded. So now this is the authority for that.
And is it the same process that they used before?
It is very similar, but it is not exactly the same.
And what's the difference?
Well, there's a couple of differences. One, they're now defining what an ag fair or field day is. And basically, you have to have been, or you have either had to have been previously funded, or you have to be in operation for 3 consecutive days.
3 consecutive.
Days,
See, we have some 2-day
right.
events.
Now, if those 2-day events have previously been funded,
They're
they're still eligible, but going into the future, no new 2-day events would be fun. So you'll see there are definitions of ag fair or field days on page 1 in the Ag Fair Association, meaning the association that represents ag fairs. You'll see what a competitive exhibit is, because part of the award is going to be a formula, and whether or not you have competitive exhibits, whether or not your plant improvements are part of, and plant improvements are also part of that formula. And so there you see those 2 definitions, and they'll come in to relevance in a minute. So it applies to the set on page 2, line 18. The chapter applies to the Secretary's distribution of grants. The ag fairs, whenever funds are appropriated to the agency or state fair or field day organization without distinct requirements that otherwise dictate how to allocate the funds. So if the capital bill has distinct requirements for how to allocate those capital dollars, then this doesn't apply to that.
And that's basically the way it runs today, so.
So then on page 3, you'll see the grant program is established. An ag fair association shall be eligible to apply for grant funds if it meets all of the following. It operates an ag fair or field day that is open a minimum of 3 consecutive 8-hour days each year, or it operates a fair that received grant funding through the previous state stipend fund. So there's who's going to be eligible. It has to timely apply for the grant, submits a complete application. It has to be in good standing with the Agency of Ag, so no ongoing enforcement actions against it. And it fully intends to continue operating an ag fair field day that's open at a minimum of 3 consecutive 8-hour days during the current and next calendar year. The Secretary creates an application form that must be utilized. They follow Administrative Bulletin 5.1 when applying and awarding grants. And then a person has to certify that all information that they provide is truthful. The Secretary has discretion to solicit relevant information and enforce an application deadline, and they may require each applicant to explain the basis for each request, explain how any awarded grant funds will be used, including how it will support general operations or plant improvement, provide accurate attendance numbers, the amount spent on premiums for competitive exhibits, amount spent on general operations, and the amount spent on plant improvements, and indicate how the requested grant will support continued operations. And then, importantly, page 4, line 19, explain its goals for the next 5 years, how it plans to achieve the goals and the role of the requested grant funds in meeting its objectives.
Now, back a few years ago, maybe, there was discussion about the Lancaster Fair, where, like Essex County, they participate basically in that Lancaster Fair. Do you remember any of the discussion on that?
I don't remember this.
But there's nothing in here that would allow anything to happen at that fair. Like, the Lancaster Fair did not apply because it's out of state, right?
Oh, yeah, it has to be a fair.
Vermont
Vermont
to
fair.
the 3-day or
Yeah.
get rich.
So this applies to the general fund money going that you're reading down
It
through?
applies to any money that's appropriated for ag fairs and field days that where it's not otherwise having distinct requirements in the appropriation. So like the capital bill, capital grant program, there could be distinct requirements in the capital bill. And that money would not apply in this program, could not be administered in this program.
So here's my only word about this. We've always given, on the general fund side, a direct, a certain amount, and it's a certain amount every year based upon what there is in dividing up the pot. And they get a consistent amount. On the capital bill side, it's a grant depending on what they have for projects. Yeah, for the fairs on their general fund side, I want them to know that this is not a grant, that this is a direct appropriation, so when they build their budget every year, they can with some confidence build a budget to say, here's what we got last year, we might get a 3 or 5 or whatever % increase, but this is our solid money every year. I think it's not healthy for fairs to go, oh, I'm applying for grant money and I might get it or I might not.
So on page 5, lines 1 through 6, you'll see the secretary has the discretion to issue the grant awards, but the secretary shall equitably distribute the appropriated funds to qualified applicants and strive to support the fairs and field days in all areas of the state. Now, there's still an application requirement because some of these fairs may not continue to operate. If they're not going to operate, you don't just equitably distribute to them a share of that general fund appropriation.
When was the last time the fair went out of business?
Well, there's flux in the fairs right now. St. Albans, where are they even going?
The Franklin County Fair is leaving here.
Yeah.
I can't.
So I think there needs to be some flexibility in here for the agency to review who actually is applying for money, because they will be operating.
I'm fine with flexibility. I just think if you're gonna plan and you're gonna have budgets and you're gonna be there every single year, and when you say grant to me, it says it could go up and down.
Or it could be.
Well, we have not given fairs nothing
For years.
for years.
So at the bottom of page 5, you'll see how the secretary is going to do that equitable distribution. First, they have had to apply, right?
Yep.
And then the secretary shall determine each applicant's percentage of total fair and field days activity through a formula that equally measures each applicant's respective percentage of the total. So they're going to look at attendance, premium expenditures, general operations, and plan improvement. Generally, the secretary shall award proportionate shares of available grant funds based on each applicant's combined percentage of total applicant activity, provided that no fair receives more than 10% of the total appropriated funds. So Champlain Valley Fair, because of looking at attendance, expenditures, plan, can't monopolize the grant. So they can't get more than 10% unless there is a year where fewer than 10 fair associations apply.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was on the board and commission's committee, which has sunsetted itself. And I was not aware that we did this when we repealed whatever it was that we repealed.
It would not have been intuitive. It would not have been transparent. It was basically a racing board. Horse racing board is where they,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I do remember reviewing that too.
And so it was not intuitive that they adopted this rule underneath that authority.
So then my question is, and we did that, so now we got 0. Why didn't the House or whoever drafted this, maybe it was the Ag Agency, just take the language that used to exist and make it exactly the same so that we don't have to be dealing with the little changes?
But I think you do have to look at the viability of the fairs going into the future and accounting for some years where they're not gonna operate. And,
Like up in St. Albans, okay. So then my other issue, and it's not really an issue, Senator Renner and I are on the Capitol, or on the Institutions Committee, so we've been dealing with the stipend. And as far as I know, it's been 100 grand for a long time, divided by 10, and everybody gets 10. But there's no prescription about how they use that, to my knowledge, in the bill. It's just,
No, it's not like there's-
here's the money, do what you want, put an electric box here, or fix the bleachers, or whatever you want to do. So I think it's gonna get bumped up a little bit this year. At least we talked about doing that, and not a lot. I'm talking another 50, I think,
Yeah,
over
but
2
still,
years.
that's more.
So,
but I
Richie's
think,
point, they can bank on that almost every year
We
without
can
worry.
work on, pretty much on that, but the other money.
The general fund money, I don't know about.
I think if the capital bill keeps on saying that's gonna equitably be apportioned among all operating fairs, that is enough to take it out of this program. Because without distinct requirements that otherwise dictate how to allocate the funds, that's the money that goes into this program. The capital bill has a distinct requirement that it's gonna be equitably apportioned among all of the operating fairs. That's a distinct requirement, takes it out of this program, keeps it separate.
Okay, all right, good.
I
So
just
that's double
say,
dipping.
in any organization, when it looks like there's play,
Flux, yeah, no, that's
that's
bad.
not good for people.
I agree. Okay. Well, I'm sorry we rebuked it. We didn't know what we were doing.
Nobody knew about
We
that.
repealed
for like
relations for a long.
It was like a year and a half.
Yeah, it was the summer before last.
Yeah. We've been running good without it.
Well, yeah, we didn't have a racing, so we thought, well, let's get rid of that.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
that basically takes you out of this program.
Yep.
But on section 2, to be fully clear that notwithstanding the requirement that an ag fair is one operating 3 days, 8 hours a day, an ag fair association that received financial assistance under the agency's previous state stipend shall be eligible for a grant under 6 VSA chapter 219. If they were getting money, they continue to get money, even if they were continue to be a 2-day fair.
New startups.
Right. New that are gonna be subject to the 3-day. Don't wanna penalize any of the historic fairs. Should I move on?
Yeah.
Moving to section 3, you're moving out of fairs into meat processing. This is really just changing the term cutting to processing. Cutting is an antiquated term, processing is really the appropriate term for use in this licensing. Moving on to section 4, you're now on weights and measures. The agency licenses and inspects all scales and other similar weights and measures. On page 8, you will see that the secretary shall not issue a weighing and measuring device unless it has been inspected and approved by the agency within 12 months of the date of application. The agency is running into just resource issues and timing issues, and they've asked for the ability to extend that inspection period to a longer period that the agency determines appropriate for the specific device that issue, provided that the period shall not extend more than 24 months from the date of application for the license.
And this is where the electric stuff is not here, then it's further in
Do you mean the scanners? No, that's here as well.
the EV charging station.
Oh, no, the EV charging stuff is not in this section.
Not in this.
Well, right, I don't even know where it wound up, but did it wind up in the motor vehicle bill?
I don't know,
Makes
but
sense.
ag was supposed to be, yes, it was in T-bill.
Yeah.
Or a bill they passed, equal to all that.
Right, and that was because the definition of a scale or gauge arguably didn't apply to an EV charger. It arguably could have. But they wanted to specifically provide what the fee would be for the inspection and licensing of that charger.
Yeah, it's $25.
The charge.
Yep,
Okay, page 8, line 10, you're into the livestock branding. Currently, the agency has requirements for if you want to brand, if you want to register and certify your animals with the brand and the brand that you're going to use, you can apply to the agency for that purpose. However, branding is not really legally necessary anymore for animal identification or animal transport. What is used are clear tags, RFID tags, or just your general registration of the animal. And so the legal effect of branding is no longer necessary. You can still brand your animals, but there's no certificate or registration that the agency is going to issue.
Didn't you say, Michael, nobody is?
Nobody, I did learn that some horse people are still using co-branding. So if their horse escapes, that they can identify it. But that's really the only example that I heard.
and they use stamps in cows' ears, besides the ear tags. You'd almost say cruelty to an animal. That can take, but we'll get rid of it anyways.
So this gets rid of all branding?
It gets rid of this agency's requirement to register and certify brands.
So you can still brand, but you don't have to be certified by the agency to
Right.
do it.
Somebody with a real shaky hand, will do the
It's-
brand.
You didn't need to get certified to do it. Your brand was certified. You got it right. And so they're no longer going to do that.
Well, I'm only thinking that in the place we are in is, I could see somebody standing up on the floor saying, I don't want anybody to brand anything.
Yeah.
Do we want outlaw?
What?
Do we want outlaw? So the horse people are still.
I mean, it's not a prohibited activity.
Yeah.
I could see somebody on the floor standing up and saying they wanted a prohibited activity.
Well, as long as you keep you onto your chair, we'll be okay.
I'm not suggesting I would do that.
No. Well, that'll come.
You can see that coming, can't you?
Oh, yeah. But it should come. I mean, we don't need it. There's so many other non-painful ways to keep track of your animals, and we do have less animals than we used to have, so. So, okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Mike.
Moving on to section 6 and several other sections. This is related to bees and apiaries. Many of these changes are gender language changes requested by the agency. There are a couple of substantive changes related to the transport of bees and the import of bees.
We had those folks in last week.
So section 6 is on page 9, lines 5 through 9. There's a requirement. Basically, This is a provision that basically is an exemption to registration of your apiary. If it's going to be moved to another registered apiary, they're just basically requesting that this be struck. If you're going to be moving within 2 weeks of the report that you submit, that they don't necessarily think this exemption is necessary anymore. And then on page 9, line 13, this strikes the exception for when you're going to be transporting your bees out of state for a limited duration for purposes of pollination and then bringing them back into the state, which is like what I believe you talked to the apiaries last week about. Section 7 is a gender language change. Instead of it saying the secretary for his or her, it's the secretary for the secretary's inspector. Similar change in page 10, page 10, section 8, gender language change. Page 11, section 9, line 8. This is just it's really just a technical language change and gender language change, and so no substantive change. Similarly, no substantive change, page 11, line 14. Then you get to page 11, section 11. This is a requirement. Currently, a person engaged in the selling of bees shall have the apiary inspected by the secretary prior, at least once each summer. And what is being proposed is that they shall have their apiary inspected within 45 days prior to any sale. So that is not, it's a more of an ongoing inspection to ensure, because your bees can get, say they're inspected in June, and then 40, they can get diseased within 15 days from then. So they have to have that ongoing inspection requirement prior to sale. Page 12, line 5, section 12, these are all gender language changes. So those, page 13, section 13. And then you get to section 14, which really the substantive change is on page 14, at the bottom of page 14. This is where you do not need an import permit or valid certificate of inspection from out-of-state state, another state, when you were importing bees into Vermont, provided that they were registered in Vermont or transported not more than 75 miles from the registered location and are imported back into the state within 30 days. That will be repealed. So if apiary in Western Vermont is going to send their bees over to New York for pollination of an orchard, they will have to get an import permit or a valid certificate of inspection from New York prior to bringing those bees back to Vermont.
And they have to, what they told us is they have to be inspected before they can take them in.
That's true, yes.
So we don't need the present law anymore. So that's why they said it had to be changed. And the 75 mile rule wasn't working.
Okay. That brings you to page 15, section 15. That is just gender language changes. Page 15, line 11, section 16. These are substantive changes. There's a change from when you're going to establish your apiary location. The language currently says that beekeepers with a total ownership of 10 hives, and the agency wants that to be 10 colonies or fewer shall be exempt from this, because the hive is the box and the colony is the bees and the box. And so that's a technical change, but substantive as well. And so you'll see that same change on page 16, line 3 and 4.
The big thing on the B section is a big section. But it was all, for the improvement in the health of our bees because we've lost so many. I think that'd be important in the report, why we're doing so much for the bees is because we've been losing too many and tightening things up for their own health.
I'm sure Richie will listen.
If you want me to do it.
No, I'll
do
do
it,
it.
But I,
It's just harassing.
He doesn't want to.
Oh. Well, don't be so dismissive, I'll get meaner. Sorry.
well, you could be any meaner than Bobby is to me.
Page 16, line 11, you're moving into the soil amendment section. A couple of years ago, you amended the soil amendment section to amend the agency's authority, amend their registration, define the scope of the universe that they were going to register. And the agency does register those products and inspect those products for consumer protection to make sure that what is being sold is actually what is advertised as being sold. And it's come to light that there's been an argument that they don't have to register, or they shouldn't be registering products that are used for hydroponic operations or other operations that don't use soil for the cultivation of the plant. And so on page 16, lines 13 through 16, the definition of soil amendment is going to continue to mean a substance or mixture of substance that's intended to improve the physical, chemical, biological, or other characteristics of the soil, or it is going to be a distinct form of horticultural growing media used in lieu of soil. So if you're going to have something that's going to improve the physical, chemical, biological, or other characteristics of media used in lieu of soil, you will need to register that product. Pay a fee and be subject to the agency's inspection and enforcement authority. Should I move on?
Yes. Yeah. What about compost? Oh, it's down below.
Yeah.
Okay.
Page 17, line 3, you're now moving into the nurseries section. The major proposal from the agency was to require the nursery license for persons who are installing nursery stock for commercial use. The license is already required for someone selling or distributing. And after debate in the House committee, this was changed to a person who is in the business of selling, installing, and distributing nursery stock for commercial need. The committee in the House wanted to be clear what distribute and what install means, so they provided definitions of those two terms. Distribute means a wholesale sale of nursery stock to transfer of title or possession of nursery stock from one person to another for consideration for the purpose of resale, retail, or the transfer of nursery stock within a business entity for the purpose of retail sale. So say you're Walmart and you ship from one Walmart store to another Walmart store for the purpose of retail sale, you would be distributing in that example. But it does not mean the retail sale or delivery of nursery stock by a retailer to a consumer.
So does that definition deviate from what's currently?
No, that's not, what the committee upstairs wanted, just the definition of distribute included for is to distinguish it from what install is.
Okay.
So install means placing, fixing, or planting of nursery stock in the ground or soil. It does not mean delivery of nursery stock to a purchaser or the placing of a potted nursery stock within a structure for its curtilage of the purchaser. And so there was the question of whether placing is distributing. And so instead of having that ambiguity, the House Committee wanted a definition of distribute, which is consistent with what the agency licenses right now.
So with the addition of the installing provision, that widens the universe of people that will have to pay a fee.
Yes. And but it's those people who are in the business of doing it. So if you say to your neighbor's teenager, I'm gonna give you $100 to plant these 5 apple trees.
Yeah.
That
That's not-
teenager's been in the business of installing nursery stock. But if you're a company that markets that service as part of your business model, then yes, you are in the business and you need a nursery license.
So currently landscapers would not be charged a fee because they're not growing anything. They're just literally putting stuff in that they buy somewhere else from somebody else.
Currently, they're not, but say, hey, I worked landscaping for a long time, and our clients were major business parks in the Philadelphia area, and in the spring, we would go to nurseries and we would buy hundreds of trees, and we would go pull the trees that died that we planted last spring out of the ground and put in the new. That type of activity is going to, if that's, that you're gonna have to register. Because remember, the nursery authority is about controlling plant infestation and plant pests. And so if my prior company, we would buy hundreds of plants, hundreds of trees, we would warehouse them until we needed them for whatever business park we were moving to next. And so the agency wants to know if there's an infestation of a certain type of nursery stock, where they need to go in order to determine and control that infestation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do I understand that landscapers in general are included, and if so, why does that not get defined here?
So it's if the landscaper is engaged in installing the nursery stock, a landscaper that just cuts grass and doesn't do installation of nursery stock is not.
But any person who's hired to put in a bunch of plants, you're saying including the tree people in Philadelphia would
Yeah.
fall under this now?
Yeah, because they were in the business of installing nursery stock.
And how are landscapers gonna figure this out?
Well, the agency's probably gonna have to do some outreach to those businesses, probably through existing nurseries.
See, we ain't taking
No, I
testimony.
was just gonna say that. I wanted to, but we just didn't
Well,
do it. Did the House take any testimony from literally the folks that just take a tree that somebody else grew and put it in the ground?
I don't know, I wasn't there for all their testimony.
I think, I mean, we can do that.
We should.
I mean, I don't want to levy a registration fee on somebody without at least giving them an opportunity to be heard and understand their side of the
I
issue.
agree.
So, but
Okay.
Will this move this to finance? Will this move this to finance?
It went to Ways and Means in the House largely because the livestock branding section that had a fee in it, and it was being repealed. And so that's, and this also has a fee on it. Going on to page 18, section 19, you'll see the fee for a license.
So if you don't take testimony in here, they're gonna ask you to finance.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is the kind of section that Secretary Bloomer sends to finance. It references a fee or changes the scope of the fee. It's pretty consistent in sending it to finance.
I'll make you a better talking about it.
Yeah, Linda, you wanna make a note of that we'll try to get, if there's a landscaping association, try to set up some time next week. We'll get them in on that because this is a brand new deal.
Okay.
And I don't know. I haven't had anybody knocking my door down or ringing the phone up. But anyways, we'll move on.
Which section is that, sir?
19,
Oh,
18 and 19.
18.
They got association for everything.
Nursery.
Vermont Nursery and Landscaping Association.
And that's who the people
Oh,
came
they
from
were-
before.
yeah,
They were
they-
in, but they weren't landscapers. They were mostly
That's right.
growers, right? Although Andrew, I think, does some landscaping, but,
Got a website.
oh yeah, they
So,
They do.
no, we didn't talk about that.
do. No, we really did. We talked about,
Maybe-
the growing end of it
Yeah,
as a diversification measure.
maybe they didn't know it was here. But
I didn't
anyways,
at the time.
we can take time to certainly hear from. And
Okay, should I move on?
always take that out.
Sure.
If the committee wants to. Then it might not even know the planning.
Oh, no, because the underlying bill doesn't, Bloomberg says,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Bloomberg can't help himself, he's gotta.
okay, go ahead.
so page 19, section 20. The change here relates to the agency's process for requiring the destruction of infested stock. So you'll see at the bottom of page 19 that they will issue an order to destroy the place plants on stop order, and it may be made verbally. Right now, it has to be in writing. The agency wants the ability to have a verbal order that's then followed up with a written order. Because if there's an exigent situation that requires immediate response, they don't want to have to like go and do a writing. So they want to be able to have the authority to issue verbal orders to destroy or stop sale. And then they will follow that up in writing within 7 days, or as soon as practical. And then the order, the written order shall include reason for action, the description of the nursery stock affected, and instructions to separate and tag all nursery stock subject to the order. That's basically that section. Section 21 takes you out of the nursery stock section and into the pest survey and detection section, which is related. And under that chapter, the secretary has authority to issue cease and desist orders, but they want to be able to have some additional specific types of orders. So that the orders will include stop sale orders that shall be in writing, include the reason for action, description of the plant tests, plant parts of plants, plant products, or regulated articles that issue, any instructions to separate, any recommended treatment to prevent. And then stop sale tag shall not be removed without the secretary's written permission or written determination for suitable disposal.
So Michael, how does that intersect with the section above where it could be made verbal? This says shall be in writing.
There are two different sections.
Okay.
One's in the nursery chapter, one's in the pest survey and detection chapter.
Yep.
So if they're in a nursery with a nursery license and they want to see infestation, they can issue a verbal order. But if they're going to issue a cease and desist or stop sale order under pest survey, they have to do it written. And then section 22, currently the state statute requires compensation owners of plants that are ordered to be destroyed by the Secretary of Agriculture. The agency has asked for this authority to be repealed. They're not doing it. No one's asked for it in a few years. And most nurseries should be insured for damage anyway.
They are insured.
They should be.
We know about horticulture, but we feel there's no insurance for crop damage.
From animals.
So this is.
Yeah.
Deer.
It's just a-
Right.
So nobody's done it in a few years, huh? That's interesting.
Well, is this fair to the nursery owners if we're gonna compensate up to $1,000 or whatever we said to farmers? This seems inconsistent to me.
Well, they haven't had it claimed anyways, right? Or are they?
They have. I mean, there's a very kind of theoretical distinction. The deer are property of the state. The wildlife, the Ferae Naturae, are held in public trust by the state for the public. And if they're the thing that is damaging your crop, theoretically, the state is the one that has that liability. Whereas
The aphids are not, you're saying.
aphids are not the Ferae Naturae.
Okay, all right, thank you. Appreciate that distinction.
And if you buy a diseased plant, and then you take it into your
Yeah.
greenhouse and it eats all the other, kills all the other plant or damages them. You're kinda, yeah, well,
Unless you have insurance.
That's
Yeah.
helpful.
and you wouldn't want to call them too many times. You wouldn't have any.
Can we have a season on aphids and so licensed?
The,
There were a couple of typos in the bill as passed the House that the editors caught, so if you are going to do an amendment, I would request the ability to fix those typos.
yeah, yeah, you will get those fixed, but we'll try to get the association in on the fees, that part of the bill. And yes, so I don't know if you want to get it all fixed at one time. or more. And, so, any other suggestive changes at this point? So, 205, we got this, that one pretty well, I thought pretty well done.
Do you want Rodney to come down again? He was ready to come if you want.
205? Yeah, we got that amendment that Michael extracted up.
Draft 1.2.
No, you should be 4.1 for H205.
Yeah.
All we have is just the amendments, so it looks like.
We don't have the bill as amended, because we haven't done the amendments.
Yeah, there's a new version of this.
The amendments.
Yeah. I thought I sent that to you this morning.
I don't check.
2.1.
You want Rodney to come down about this?
He could if he wants to listen. And then,
Yeah, I did send it under,
What time you guys have?
at
Oh, got it.
8:20.
All right, I'll have copies momentarily.
Then, have you been in on any of the fencing discussions that we've had? The virtual fencing?
No, I haven't been here for that. I think you're looking for a grant program to pilot the invisible fencing for livestock.
Yeah, and I think what we're gonna need for our folks is just some language that would allow that to happen for 150,000. And it would be handled through the farm viability program.
So 150 to VHCD.
Farm viability.
For grants.
Yeah.
To implement invisible fencing for livestock, stock or cattle.
I think it should be cattle. But how do we differentiate between milk cows and beef?
I'm gonna say dairy cows or beef cattle or something like that.
Sheep and as well as sheep and goats?
You want sheep and goats in there too?
Yeah.
Okay. But not emus.
Emu.
No, that's the default definition of livestock.
Oh, I see.
It
We
includes,
don't want to miss it.
includes pigs, emus,
You could just say livestock, then I guess.
camelid.
Yeah, can we just say livestock?
You could say livestock, water buffaloes.
I think it should. Yeah. Because it's basically rotational grazing for beef animals
Okay.
and sheep and goats. And
Yeah, we don't want to fence a buffalo.
Thank you.
I think the buffalo are gone anyway.
yeah, they are.
Apparently.
They were grazing at the storage patties in Shelburne for a while, but they're gone.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I don't know if it's necessary to put in there, but we want to try doing test plots with solar arrays to eat under the solar arrays, as well as utility right-of-ways.
Yeah,
E-trails.
Aren't solar arrays supposed to be fenced?
Yeah, but if you were gonna separate out sections of it so that they clean it up, then you have to put sub fence in. The outside, the perimeter is fenced, but it's maybe 3 acres or 5 acres and animals will, if you give them the whole thing, they'll poop on a lot of good stuff and
Okay,
need only.
so it's for grants for invisible fencing, including for
And it's
sub fencing within solar array.
a pilot program to see if that works. Because we don't want people buying stuff if it won't work. If it will work, it could save a lot of labor, time, and expense for small firms. Okay. Well, we'll run through 205. We decided not to do your other bill.
The miscellaneous act, bill.
I don't. I knew you were gonna say that somehow.
We're just as happy without it.
Yeah, pretty well, yeah.
So anyways, small farm, I think we only got a couple of amendments, right, Mike?
Well, right, in this version, you did change some of the provisions of the House passed version. Specifically, the requirements about the income, 50% of determining whether or not you're a small farmer, if you hit the 50% of federal or 50% of your income from farming as defined by the state, you determined that that income threshold was not necessary, and you just wanted a small farmer to be any person who owns or operates a small farm subject to the RAPs. House is not more than the number of animals specified in statute for a small farm, and it's not permitted as a medium farm or large farm at the time of application.
Well, did we do the strike all first or, and then rewrote it, or did we do the strike all at the end?
I don't quite understand the question. So the strike all, your amendment from the very beginning has been a strike all.
Sorry, no. Yeah, we tried.
And the question then became, per the agency's input, that what do they have control over, authority over? And so they were concerned that if they were providing grants to accessory on-farm businesses, that they would not have authority over some accessory on-farm businesses because they do not qualify as farming. So what you did in the definition or in the eligibility for accessory on-farm businesses is that they have to 50% of the total annual sales of the business are farm products. More than 50% are farm products from the applicant's farm. That puts them into the universe of principally produced. So that's something that the agency does have authority over. Agricultural products principally produced on the farm, that is farming. And so that accessory on-farm business, it's not going to be what some people think is an accessory on-farm business, you know, the candle maker or the distiller that qualifies as an accessory on-farm business under Title 24. It's going to be a business that qualifies as farming under Title 6. And that will give the agency comfort that they can award grants because they will have authority over that entity. And similar change, page 2, lines 1 through 3. You wanted the grants to be available for initiation or expansion of the farm stand or farm store. But remember that a farm store can quickly become a retail store if it's not selling 50% or more of its annual sales from the farm stand or farm products. So we don't want a farm store to turn into, you know, selling water pistols and, you know, things that are not farm products. But I would note that page 2, lines 2 and 3, it's not farm products from its farm, it's just farm products.
So you could sell your neighbor's stuff if
Right.
and I think in one place you had to do 50% from your own farm and thought that we talked about if you were selling your neighbor's maple syrup in your farm stand and your carrots and small veggies, if the dollar amount was counted, you could run out of, with the neighbor syrup would be much higher.
So the reality is that those provisions, that restriction still exists. If you're gonna open a farm stand or farm store, because you get Act 250 exemption and municipal exemption when you qualify under the RAPs. And a farm stand qualifies under the RAPs when it's selling products that's principally produced on the farm. And that's still more than 50%. So a farm stand that's gonna be applying for this grant is gonna be like, I don't wanna be regulated under Act 250, I don't wanna be regulated by municipal zoning. They're still gonna navigate that principally produced, but for the purposes of this grant, they just need to say, hey, you're selling 50% of farm products from your store. And you're not gonna be the new Dollar General.
Any questions, Ron?
No, but I guarantee you that I would never sell my neighbor syrup.
Because it's not.
Yeah, no.
You'd sell your own before your neighbors. I don't know about it.
So the only other, there, it looks like there's a substantive change on page 3, line 3, but that is just going back to a version of the bill prior to draft 3.1. In draft 3.1, I had included the principally produced criteria on page 2, line 13, and you didn't like it there. You didn't like that. And so that's been removed, and then the definition of farm products can now include products across or livestock produced by the small farmer. So the next substantive issue is page 3, line 20. You wanted to see if ARPA funds were available. And according to JFO, Sarah Clark in particular, all of those funds have been committed, but there's possibility that some of them become available because it's possible that some people who have received are not going to use them. And
So,
right.
so
But the fact is that ARPA funds can be used up until 2026.
Yeah.
So they may not become available as unused portions until next year. or the
So
year
should
after.
that date be changed?
Well, the thing is, you can only make this appropriation in this year.
So,
Right. I think this is probably an issue that will have to get worked out in the appropriations.
was there a reason for one-time money, Rodney, or?
Well,
Go ahead.
we were told that when you stand up a new program, it's to,
If you were lucky, you could get one-time money.
Right. The committee originally asked for 250 in base and 250 as one. So they were asking for 500 with 250 in base. And the House Appropriations Committee did, as Representative Graham said, that they said it's a new program. We're not going to give you base, we're going to give you one time.
So, but the one-time money would have to be in the general fund then. Wouldn't be able to be federal funds, right?
Well, the language says available from federal or state funds. I mean, you have made a lot of one-time appropriations over the past few years with federal money.
So maybe we should leave that federal and state monies in.
Right. I think
Did you got it, or did you add that?
I added that.
Okay, so you added. that,
Federal
so
or
it
state
should
law.
Stay in. Yep. Irene?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So back on page 2, please, line 13. Grammatically, that makes no sense to me. You can take out the third and fourth word and still have it mean what we need.
Yeah, but it should say farm products mean.
Thank you. I have to report on this bill. I don't want to be hung up on.
Any other questions? Regards to 205? And Ryan, do you have any questions or?
So my
We
only
didn't
question,
really change it all.
no, my only question was put it in the working land program.
Oh, okay, there's a set aside. Didn't we do something about a set aside that they would, this money would have to be used for this particular program, but they would manage it or something?
Right, it's just within, it's now within the small farm, it's in the Working Lands Enterprise Board Authority. And it's a set aside by keeping it separate from their general authority.
And didn't we do something about a simplified application?
Yeah, we did that.
One pager or something?
Page 2, lines 8 through 11, board shall develop a short, accessible, and easily completed application for the purpose of applications under this section.
The thinking behind that is they have, I think it's 3 people that told us that word.
2.5. 2.5.
2.5. 2.5 people, but one of them really works hard, so I counted it as 3. They're already trained in
Right.
doing applications and all that, and rather than setting up another crew, they felt that they would have ample time to handle this extra 20 or so applications. And rather than expand and have to hire people, they could do it, you know, with who they had already.
Did they said specifically that they didn't need anything for administrative costs?
Thought that's what Abby testified to. We could double check with that.
I can't, I know they explained what they had. I never really heard, but maybe I didn't listen.
You're doing your emails.
No, I was right here, but sometimes I miss things.
You're that old. You're too
I'm older
young
than
to-
you
You're
sometimes.
too young to,
But
we'll check that.
yeah, if you could, I would feel better.
Yeah, we'll give Abby a call. I thought that's,
I didn't hear her ask for administrative costs.
no,
I didn't hear her ask, but she wasn't asked that either.
No, that's probably a good point.
so, we'll double check that for Rodney.
So I have no problem with being in the working lands program. I just trying to make sure that they can't put this money into the big pot.
In the big
I'd
one.
rather,
Yeah, hopefully that language,
I don't know, but
have
I,
you,
and since that I talked to you, I actually talked to somebody on the working land board, and they didn't think that would be a possibility to do, so. I just.
well, I think we had the same concern that, you know, if you're going after a big amount of money, you need to hire somebody to write the grant for you. And that is professional enough to beat out your competition. So you get the money and the little guys get the chaff after the wheat's all gone.
Right, that was the purpose of it. So, it's a little guy from a fair shop.
Did you see that language that we put in uh, yeah, you want to show Rodney page?
Yeah, it's page 1 there.
The, so are we all set with?
I think it's great.
Okay.
um,
Senator Renner.
We need to change. Right now, but
Did you say, were there any other checks that you had to do?
The only thing was the state or federal funds and whether or not you wanted to be clear, but
Yeah.
you just said leave that in and the appropriations committee will address that.
I think it's wise to leave it in if there are any.
And to address Representative Graham's concern in the appropriation, I could say it's solely for the grants under 6 VSA 4608. So they couldn't issue it under their general authority. If you wanted me to do that.
No, that would be fine.
on page 3, or-
I would probably say on page 4, small farmer diversification and transition grants under the Working Land Enterprise Program established in 6 VSA 4608.
Second for that.
All set, Roger?
I think
Thank you.
See you later.
Well, good to see you.
So we, have you worked with Pepper and Bren on cannabis stuff?
I did. I worked with Bryn to develop a proposed amendment to H270.
Um, That's 1.2.
1.2, yeah.
You want to
Sure.
run quickly
So-
through that?
So currently, in 7,
Did any, excuse me. When did any of that get show up?
I just emailed them when we're taking it up now.
Yeah.
And they should be paying attention, and Michelle Childs might also come down from legislative council.
okay. So on page 1, line 7, the current law 7 VSA 869 provides that, you'll see it on page 1, lines 11 through 15, a cannabis establishment shall not be regulated as farming under the RAPs or under use value, sales use tax, or other relevant state law. But as you can see on page 1, line 9 through 10, there's a specific regulation for small cultivators. And currently, small cultivators are not regulated as farming, but they are provided with some of the regulatory benefits of farming, specifically on page 3, lines 5 through 18. They are not regulated in the same manner as farming under Act 250, which is 10 VSA Chapter 151. They're not regulated by a municipal bylaw under 24 VSA Chapter 117. They're eligible to enroll in use value, and they are exempt from the sales tax for the 3 sales tax exemptions. what was requested on the top of page 3 is for all outdoor cultivators licensed by the board to receive those same 4 regulatory benefits, with one benefit still at question. And so you will see that page 3, 1, 4 through 4, notwithstanding the provision that says cannabis establishments are not farming, cultivator licensed under the chapter who initiates cultivation of cannabis outdoors on parcel of land shall be regulated X. So a couple of key aspects here in that lead-in language on lines 1 through 4. It's those who are cultivating outdoors. So it might be the person that currently is getting the cultivator license, and maybe the person who's getting the mixed license, which includes the authority to outdoors. But according to Bryn, the distinction between those 2 licenses might go away. So she didn't want it to say a person that's a cultivator or a person that's a mixed cultivator. She just wants a person that's cultivating outdoors. And so that was her request. Then there was the request from rural Vermont, which the board is okay with, that it not be a qualification that the land was subject to the RAPs prior to licensed cultivation of cannabis. So this will allow new applicants, new cultivators to purchase land that's not currently subject to the RAPs and then cultivate it and be qualifying for exemption from municipal zoning, etc. So it's not just somebody that's currently farming qualifies, it's anybody that receives the license for outdoor cultivation will receive the regulatory benefits listed on page 3, 5 through 18. Now, the issue that's still at issue is whether or not they should be exempt from Act 250. The other day, Bryn said that the board's position was that they should not, because they weren't going to trigger Act 250 anyway because of the square footage that's allowed under the maximum cultivator license wouldn't trigger the 10-acre threshold under Act 250 anyway. But the 10-acre threshold is not 10 acres of what's cultivated, it's 10 acres of involved land.
So why don't we add that in?
So I just want to be clear that even if you're a small cultivator with 1,000 square foot, you could still have 10 acres of involved land, because involved land is what you use to support the commercial development that is subject to Act 250. It could be the barn on the far side of the property where you house your equipment for your cannabis cultivation. It could be where you're getting compost for the purpose of your cannabis cultivation from your farm. That's all involved land. And so if someone has an issue with your cannabis cultivation and they're not exempt from Act 250, any person can make a complaint to the relevant district commission that you need an Act 250 permit because the involved land in the cannabis cultivation is 10 acres or more.
Well, are we talking about involved land, involved assets of the owner? I mean, it makes a big difference what we're really talking about.
There is a definition of involved land.
I mean, I would think that it would be the land in which the cannabis was growing, as long as it's less than the 10 acres, you would not be subject to,
It's not just what you're growing. All right, this is what involved land is. Involved land includes the entire tracts or tracts of land upon which the construction of improvements for commercial or industrial purposes will occur, and any other tract to be used as part of the project or where there is a relationship to the tract or tracts upon which the construction of improvements will occur, such that there is a demonstrable likelihood that the impact on the value sought to be protected by Act 250 will be substantially affected by reason of that relationship. In that event that a commercial or industrial project is completed in stages or as part of a larger undertaking, all land involved in the entire project shall be included for the purposes of determining jurisdiction. So a small cultivator that's proposing to go to a large cultivator, the entire parcel is going to be included in that. So I think there may be instances where the involved land for cultivation might not trigger 10 acres, even if it's on a 10-acre parcel. It's possible, but there's a possibility that it will trigger the involved land criteria and then subject the project to an Act 250, the cultivation to an Act 250.
so we've got it written so it's full employment for a lawyer.
Well, I didn't write it.
Well, somebody wrote it that, I mean, anytime you write something so there's controversy, that's employment for an attorney. And I don't know, it seems to chase us in this building.
But if you follow the board's recommendations, I think Bryn was correct that many of the cultivators won't trigger Act 250. But you need to know that there's a possibility that some may, and I don't know, and then it's up to you what you want to do.
Because we're going from, they want to do away with tier 1. And so these small guys would move into 2 and 3. So we're talking about going from the space size of this room to a half-court basketball playing court.
Right, but that's what they can cultivate. What they use or what's involved in that cultivation might be equipment, it might be the shed, it might be the compost that they produce on the farm.
But who, I mean, we're picking at pretty small. I mean, the compost comes in 4 or 5 yards, you know, makes a pile 9 as big as this table.
So, can I ask a quick clarification? So, you're saying it's not the area itself, it's what happens to prepare for everything that could trigger. Okay.
Right, so this occurred, Vermont Compost Company up the road. They were leasing a facility on a farm that was 10 acres or more. Okay. And the question became whether or not the compost facility on the farm needed an Act 250 permit. And the NRB, the officer basically did a determination whether or not 50% of the products were coming from the farm, 50% of the ingredients in the compost were coming from the farm. And even though Vermont Compost didn't own the farm, they looked to see whether or not like the wood chips were coming from the farm, whether or not the manure was coming from the farm, whether they looked at the entire farm parcel to see if it was contributing to Vermont compost and whether or not Vermont compost is part of that larger farm also qualified as farming. That's what the NRD officer would do. They would look and see if the larger part of the farm contributes to the cultivation, and therefore that cultivation is on 10 acres or more of a parcel.
Add it all together.
Yes. So Bryn's probably right, that many of them will not trigger that,
I wouldn't think.
but it's a possibility. And then maybe it's like any other development, right? That when they trigger it, they've got to get it.
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, so if you had a tool shed and your tractor was parked under that and your,
You use that tractor for the
Cultivator.
cultivation involved land.
so Michelle, did you have some questions on that?
No, I just came to learn from Mike on all of this land use stuff, since it's not my area, and to be helpful if I can on any other part of
Well, it,
of H270.
I know our small growers, I doubt if any of them are gonna be encouraged to make their plots bigger. If they're gonna get thrown under the bus with having to comply with a neighbor going by and don't like the odor, say.
Or they need to just be aware of the regulatory thresholds and manage their operation to avoid that. You know, I've said, and I brought it up the other day with NRCS, and Oregon NRCS basically saying, if you're substantially separate, we'll still fund your farm that's not growing cannabis, and you can keep on growing cannabis, we're not gonna do anything if you're substantially separate.
So the plot of land should be separate.
If you're
But you said
substantially
Carl-
separate,
Carl did separate his and,
right, but that wasn't about, that was about where he was getting his ingredients
so,
and whether or not, because he was getting them from the farm, it qualified as principally produced. It's not about, that wasn't about really involved land, it was
So-
about involved land, but it was, that's kind of like you get into this wash cycle with Act 250 and like,
so
I'm not criticizing Act, I think most people get an Act 250 permit relatively easily, but when you
Oh.
don't, there's a bit of a wash.
well, I didn't have any problems. I did one last year. No problems at all, but.
And your district officer is widely considered one of the best.
Yeah,
And so she gets praise pretty much from everyone for working with.
oh, she's excellent to work with. You know, you hire your engineer to design your wastewater and all that stuff and send the report in, yeah. Well, I don't see why if you're a tier 3 is how big a plot?
It's not 25.
It's 25,
25.
and there's a plant total, I think, too.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
and the one that confused me is when you've got part inside and part outside. They brought that up.
But the way that I originally drafted the language was if you were a licensed outdoor cultivator or a mixed cultivator, and Bryn said that they're contemplating just doing away with those distinctions. And so she didn't want them.
But right now, they do have a 2,500 square foot inside and
So Graham, can you hear us? Yeah.
Yes.
We've only got a few more minutes here,
5,000.
5,000.
so a quarter acre.
Pardon?
That's a quarter acre. No, no, it'd only be an eighth of an acre. Because there's 40,000 square feet in an acre, so, or 42. So it would only be a quarter,
600 or 625 plants.
yeah. And I don't see where they would use much different equipment than they use on their tier 1 products. I mean, if you've already got your equipment for tier 1 and you got your water and all that, I mean, it isn't a big lift to get to a quarter of an acre. And a quarter of an acre, what size of that? That parking lot might be even bigger than that. So, I mean, it's not very big. Your house would cover a quarter acre, right?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more.
A little more. Can he do indoor grow in his house? I think he does anyway.
Now your electric bill's up.
did chickens like those plants?
Well, Graham, did you have a question or a statement? Or-
Mostly a statement. Graham Uning, Strufenacht, Policy Director at Rural Vermont, member organization of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition. I see Jeffrey here from Vermont Growers Association, also a member of that coalition. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we support the amendment drafted by Legislative Council. And I think, just for the committee's understanding, for us, this is ultimately about doing what we can as a state to treat outdoor cultivation treat outdoor cultivation as agriculture. And this includes Act 250. We've seen that there's a great interest in clarity for producers, for municipal and state actors. And if we do not include this clarity, there's going to be controversy. I believe Senator Starr, you really pointed to the inevitability this will end up in court. And the costs will inevitably fall upon producers and the Natural Resources Board and those state entities that will have to essentially work this out in court. So we have the opportunity to provide some clarity here. As Legislative Council suggests, we have barns, sheds, roads, and we have local biases that could be brought to bear at any moment, sort of calling into question whether or not an operation would meet a threshold to be brought under jurisdiction of Act 250. And no farmer, as John Roberts and many other farmers we could bring in could testify to, wants to even run the risk in any way of bringing their farm under jurisdiction of Act 250. And I guess as we're discussing the potential harm and impacts of not including this exemption, I'd like to ask the committee, what is the harm of including it? Why would we want to regulate these outdoor producers as though they are development? How is that in the state's interest? And our contention as a coalition is that it's not. I know this is the main subject right now. I'd also ask you to consider our recommendations around propagation. I think that falls in the Ag Committee's jurisdiction, but I will leave that for more questions if you want to ask them.
Yeah, I was talking with the chair of government operations or next door here that has the bill, and they're up to their ears in legislation that's got to get moved out of there, and they aren't gonna probably vote on that legislation. They'll take them until mid or the end of next week. So we've got some extra time on our proposed amendments to give them. So we haven't got we can keep plugging away on this and try to figure out how we can do what we want to do without you guys having to get, or you can do what you want to do on your little quarter acre without being considered maybe a development. So I think we'll probably, we got people out there waiting for us, so we'll probably work on this, and it would be good, Michael, if you could talk to William, Michelle, and, you know, the players in this, and see if there's some way we could get this written up to make it clear, and less questions.
Would you mind if I talk to Peter Gill at Act 250, at the Natural Resources Board?
Yeah, that would be probably most. So, thank you for stopping in.
Always pleasure.
You heard what they say about that. It's
Do I wanna
always a
know?
pleasure. Yeah. Sometimes it's when you come, and sometimes it's when you leave. I've been told that.
I'm gonna go with it's always a pleasure for you when I show up.
When you come, yeah.
He's the boss, not me.
Us, myself here, first.
Definitely,
Okay.
yeah. I'm not really the boss. I just try to keep the animals under control.
How's it going? How's it working?
Good. I got a good crew. Excellent. So, did
I thought that would be a good idea right about now, yeah.
Just quick five.
are you folks in a big time?
Nope.
We're here for you and we don't have anything next.
Well, why don't you,
On break?